My name is Arthur, and I am 64 years old. I have been a father for 38 years, a widower for 2, and a fool for most of the time in between. I say that not to invite your pity, friends. I say it because if I had understood sooner what I understand now, I might have saved myself a great deal of pain. But then again, maybe the pain was the only teacher I was ever going to listen to. I did not grow up with anything. I want to make sure you understand that before I tell you the rest of this story. My father was a pipe fitter in Akron, Ohio. He worked himself half to death before his heart gave out at 58. My mother cleaned hotel rooms 6 days a week and never once complained about it in front of me. I watched those two people pour themselves out like water from a pitcher. And when the pitcher was empty, there was nothing left. I swore I would do better. I swore my children would never have to watch me disappear the way I watched my father disappear. When I was 19, I got a job driving a delivery truck for a small plumbing supply company in Columbus. It was not glamorous. My hands smelled like copper fittings and pipe dope, and I ate my lunch sitting on a loading dock every single day for 3 years. But I paid attention. I watched how the business worked. I watched what the owner did right and what he did wrong. I watched where the money went and where it got wasted. And when I was 26, I borrowed $11,000 from 2 different banks and my Uncle Gerald, God rest him, and I opened my own small plumbing supply operation out of a rented warehouse on the east side of Columbus. My wife, Beverly, she believed in me before I believed in myself. We had met at a church potluck when we were both 22, and from the first conversation we ever had, I knew she was the kind of woman who only comes along once in a lifetime. She kept the books for our little business at the kitchen table every night after working a full day at the school district. She never asked for anything she knew we couldn't afford. She was Grace walking around in a woman's body, and I loved her more than I have ever been able to find words for. Our son, Nathan, was born in the 2nd year of our marriage. He was a beautiful, laughing child, and from the moment I held him in that hospital, I made him a promise I never said out loud. I promised him he would never know what it felt like to be poor. I promised him the life I had clawed my way toward would be his starting line, not his finish line. I kept that promise. Maybe too well. The business grew. Slowly at first, then faster. By the time Nathan was in middle school, we had 3 warehouses, a fleet of 12 delivery trucks, and contracts with most of the major construction firms in central Ohio. I was not a wealthy man by any grand measure, but I was comfortable. More than comfortable. I was the kind of man who had built something real with his hands and his stubbornness, and that meant everything to me. Nathan had the best of everything. Private high school, a car on his 16th birthday, a real one, not some rusted heap like I drove at that age. A college education at a university I paid for in full. He studied business, and when he graduated, I brought him into the company. I wanted him to learn it from the ground up, the way I had. I wanted him to shake the hands of the truck drivers and learn their names. I wanted him to sit across from clients and understand that every contract we won was built on 30 years of reputation. He had other ideas. Nathan was smart. I will never take that from him. But his intelligence was the cold kind, the kind that looks at a room full of people and sees leverage points instead of human beings. He started talking about restructuring almost immediately. He wanted to renegotiate contracts. He wanted to cut the warehouse staff and automate. He called our longtime drivers, some of whom had been with me since the early days, he called them redundant overhead. I would push back, and he would look at me with this expression, patient and slightly condescending, like he was waiting for an old dog to finish its thought. I let it go more than I should have. Then Beverly got her diagnosis. It was a Tuesday morning in November when the doctor said the word that rearranges every word that comes after it, pancreatic. She was 61 years old. She had never smoked a day in her life. She walked 3 miles every morning, and the cancer didn't care about any of that. The doctors were not optimistic. I sat in that office holding her hand and felt the entire architecture of my life shift on its foundation. I stopped going into the office. I stopped caring about invoices and contracts and quarterly projections. I sat with Beverly at every appointment. I drove her to treatment. And I made her soup from scratch because it was the one thing I could do that made me feel useful, and I needed desperately to feel useful. Nathan visited. Sometimes. And I too. His visits were short, and he always seemed distracted, checking his phone in the driveway before he came in, as if whatever was on that screen was in competition with his mother who was lying in our bedroom slowly losing weight. I didn't say anything to him about it. I told myself he processed things differently. I told myself grief made people strange. Beverly passed on a Wednesday morning in March. She had asked me the night before to open the bedroom window because she wanted to hear the birds when she woke up. I opened the window. She didn't wake up. And, I sat in that chair next to the bed for a long time before I called anyone. I just needed a few more minutes with her. The months after that were the darkest of my life. My friends, if you have ever lost the person who was your whole compass, you know exactly what I mean when I say I didn't know which way to face in the morning. I would stand in the kitchen looking at the coffee maker and forget why I had come in there. Her things were still everywhere. Her reading glasses on the nightstand. Her handwriting on the grocery list stuck to the refrigerator. I couldn't throw any of it away. It was during this time that Nathan told me he was getting married. Her name was Paige. She was 31, beautiful in a very deliberate way, and she had grown up in a wealthy suburb of Cincinnati. Her father, a man named Clifford, had made his money in commercial real estate. He was the sort of man who kept a running mental inventory of everyone's net worth and organized the world accordingly. He wore a signet ring and called waiters by the wrong name on purpose. I disliked him within 15 minutes of meeting him, but I smiled and shook his hand because Nathan was happy, and a father will swallow a great deal for the sake of his child's happiness. The wedding was large and expensive, and I paid for a significant portion of it without being asked twice. I sat in the front row and watched my son marry this woman, and I thought about Beverly, and I held myself together by sheer will. After the wedding, Nathan and Paige moved into my house. This was Nathan's idea, framed as a temporary arrangement. The market was difficult, he said. They needed time to find the right place. I had more space than I needed. It made sense, didn't it, Dad? It made sense to me because I was still lost in my grief and I wanted the company. I see that now. The months settled into a routine that I told myself was normal. Paige redecorated parts of the house without asking me. Small things at first. A new rug in the hallway. Different curtains in the living room. Beverly's curtains, the ones she had picked out herself, went into a box in the garage. I found the box 2 weeks later and stood there, in the cold, for a long time. Clifford and his wife, Sandra, came to visit more and more frequently. They were always polite to me in the way that powerful people are polite to people they consider beneath them, which is to say not politely at all when you looked closely at it. Clifford would hold court in my living room like he owned it. He would pour himself my bourbon without asking. He would finish a sentence I started and redirect the conversation toward himself. I was becoming a ghost in my own house. Then came Christmas Eve. I had been looking forward to it in the way that grieving people look forward to the holidays, which is with a fragile, desperate kind of hope. The first Christmas without Beverly. I wanted it to matter. I had put up the tree myself. I had hung the ornaments, including the ones she had made by hand out of salt dough the year Nathan was 4 years old. I had cooked for 2 days. A standing rib roast, her green bean casserole from memory, a pie from the recipe on the card in her handwriting. The dining room table was set. It was a long mahogany table, the same one Beverly and I had bought at an estate sale the year we moved into the house. It had 8 chairs, and I was sitting in mine, at the head of the table, the same place I had sat for every holiday meal for over 20 years. Clifford and Sandra were there. 2 of Paige's cousins I had never met before were there with their husbands. Nathan and Paige moved around the room being hosts, and I noticed that no one asked me if I needed anything. Then Nathan came to me. He crouched down next to my chair. He had a look on his face I hadn't seen before, something between discomfort and calculation. "Hey, Dad," he said quietly. "So, the thing is, Clifford's back is really bothering him. He needs to sit in a chair with arms for support. You know how it is." I looked at the chair I was sitting in. It had arms. "Every chair at this table has arms," I said. "Right, but," he paused. "This seat is more central, better for conversation. You know how he likes to be in the middle of things. That's operating." I was thinking, maybe you could just grab one of the chairs from the kitchen? I already brought one in and set a place for you at the end. You'll still be at the table. I looked down the table. At the far end, pressed against the wall because there wasn't quite enough room, it was a wooden kitchen chair with no cushion. A dinner plate, no wine glass. Ah, friends, I have been hit hard in my life. I have had business deals fall apart and money disappear and a doctor tell me my wife was going to die. But something about that chair, that lonely, thoughtless chair, broke something in me that I am not sure has ever fully repaired itself. I looked at my son. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me at Clifford, across the room. I understood everything in that moment. All of it. He wanted Clifford to see him as the man in charge of this house. It's 6. He wanted to give Clifford the seat at the head of his father's table while his father sat at the end in a kitchen chair without a wine glass, so that Clifford would know, so that Paige would know, that Nathan had arrived. That Nathan was the man here now, that the old man could be moved to accommodate the arrangement. I thought about Beverly's curtains in the box in the garage. I thought about the salt dough ornaments on the tree. I thought about 38 years. I did not make a scene. I am a man who was raised by quiet, dignified people, and they are still inside me even now. I stood up slowly. I straightened my cardigan. I looked at Nathan and I said, "Merry Christmas, son," in the most even voice I could manage. I walked past the kitchen chair he had set for me. I walked down the hallway. I got my coat from the closet, and I walked out the front door of my own house. I drove to a diner 3 miles away that I had never been to before. I sat at the counter and I ordered coffee and a piece of pecan pie and I ate it alone. The man behind the counter was maybe 30 years old and he didn't ask me any questions and I was grateful for that more than he will ever know. I sat at that counter for a long time. Then I took out my phone. And I made a call. His name is Walter Grimes. He has been my attorney for 22 years. His office was closed because it was Christmas Eve, but he picked up on the third ring because that is the kind of man Walter is. I told him what I needed. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Arthur, I'll be at your office on the 26th. Have everything ready." I went home that night after I knew they would all be asleep. I went to bed in my own room. I lay there in the dark, and I looked at the ceiling, and I thought about what my father would have thought of all this. He was a pipe fitter who worked himself to death, and he died with his dignity intact, and that was worth more than any company or any house or any title. I had been moving slowly. Now, I was going to move all at once. On the 26th, I met Walter. I told him everything. He took notes in his careful, methodical way. Then he looked up at me and said, "You understand. This is going to be a significant change." "I understand," I said. The first thing I did was call my accountant and begin the process of formally restructuring my ownership position in the company. Over the previous 18 months, I had allowed Nathan to hold an operational title, but the equity structure had never changed. I still owned the controlling interest. Nathan had been drawing a salary, a generous one, and making decisions as though the company was already his. It was not. I issued a formal notice through Walter removing Nathan from his operational role effective 30 days out. I reinstated myself as active CEO. I notified our board of advisors and our major clients personally by phone. Every single one of them said some version of the same thing. They were glad I was back. Then I spoke to my financial advisor about the house. I had been allowing Nathan and Paige to live there without a lease, without rent, without any formal arrangement. That was going to change. Walter drafted a formal notice to vacate. 60 days. Legal. Clean. I left it on the kitchen table on a Thursday morning while they were both still asleep. Nathan called me at 8:47 that morning. "Dad, what is this?" "It's exactly what it says it is. You're evicting me? Your own son? Over a chair?" "Not over a chair," I said. "Over 20 years of believing you were the kind of man your mother raised you to be. Over finding out I was wrong. One play. He came to talk to me in person. He brought Paige. She cried, and it was a convincing performance. She said they had nowhere to go. He and PC. I reminded her that her father owned 3 properties in the greater Cincinnati area and that perhaps Clifford, who had been so comfortable at my table on Christmas Eve, might find room for his daughter and son-in-law. That did not land well. Nathan tried every angle he knew. He said I was acting irrationally because of grief. He said his mother would have wanted him to stay. He said I was destroying the family. Each time he used Beverly's name, I felt something harden in me. He didn't get to use her name as a tool. Then Walter found something. In the course of auditing the company books as part of the restructuring, our accountant found irregularities going back 11 months. Nathan had been approving personal expenses through the company. Not small amounts. Dinners, a weekend trip to a resort in Scottsdale that Paige had posted about on social media, renovations to a vacation rental property that, it turned out, he had purchased secretly in his wife's name using a loan he had co-signed through the company's credit line without my authorization. He had been stealing from me, from the company I had built over 30 years, from the thing my father never got to see but that I had made out of nothing and hard work and Beverly's handwriting in a ledger at the kitchen table. I will be honest with you, friends. When Walter showed me those documents, I did not feel rage. I felt a deep, exhausted sadness. I thought, how did I raise this person? What did I fail to give him or fail to withhold from him that turned him into someone capable of this? I sat with that question for a long time. I don't have a clean answer to it. I think I gave him too much and asked too little. I think I confused providing for him with teaching him. And I think the road I paved with gold. I forgot to put any guardrails on. And that is the part that is on me. I want to say that clearly. A man who looks back honestly has to account for his own role in what went wrong. But honesty also has to account for the fact that he was a grown man who made his own choices. We filed a civil complaint. Nathan, to my genuine surprise, hired an attorney and tried to fight it. His legal argument was thin. The documentation Walter had assembled was comprehensive. The company's credit authorization records were unambiguous. There was no version of the facts where Nathan had permission to do what he had done. The deposition was the hardest day. I sat across a conference table from my son, and he looked at me with something I had never seen on his face before. Not arrogance. Not the patient condescension of a younger man who thinks he's smarter than his father. He looked frightened. He looked like a boy. For a moment I saw him at 4 years old, making ornaments out of salt dough on the kitchen table with his mother. Then I thought about the kitchen chair. The judge ruled in my favor on all material claims. Nathan was ordered to repay the misappropriated funds in full, with interest. His legal fees were substantial and came out of money he didn't really have. I instructed Walter to place the bulk of my estate, including the house, the company assets, and the investment accounts, into a managed trust. Nathan could petition for access in 7 years if he could demonstrate changed character to an independent trustee. Otherwise, the remainder would pass to a list of charitable beneficiaries Beverly and I had discussed years ago, including the school district where she had worked for 22 years. I learned later, through the kind of way you learn things in a small professional world, that when Nathan's financial situation became clear, when Clifford and Sandra realized their son-in-law was not the commanding presence at the head of a successful family business but was in fact a man with significant legal judgments against him and no income, Paige began staying at her parents' house in Cincinnati. She filed for divorce 4 months after the trial concluded. Nathan called me the night he found out she had filed. He was crying. Not the strategic tears I had seen before. The real kind. The kind that comes when a person has run out of everything else. "Dad?" he said. "I don't know what happened to me." Dad. I sat with that for a moment. "I think you got comfortable," I told him. "I think you forgot that everything you had came from somewhere. I think you looked at what I built, and you thought it was just there. The way the sky is just there. Like it had always been there and always would be. You forgot that somebody got up at 4:30 in the morning and drove a delivery truck in February to start building it. You forgot that your mother kept the books at the kitchen table after working all day. You forgot that people are not assets and loyalty is not inefficiency. You forgot all of that, and then you put me in a kitchen chair at Christmas and expected me to smile." He didn't say anything for a long time. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said finally. "I'm genuinely sorry." "I know you are," I said. "I believe that you are sorry right now, in this moment. The question that matters isn't whether you're sorry. The question is who you decide to become from here." I did not invite him back. I did not offer to undo anything. I told him that there was a process now, a formal one, and that if he wanted to demonstrate to a trustee in 7 years that he had changed, he was going to have to show that in the way he lived, not in what he said over the phone. He asked if we could have dinner sometime. I said I would think about it. I am still thinking about it. I live alone in my house now. Nathan and Paige are gone. The kitchen chair Nathan brought in from the kitchen on Christmas Eve I put back where it belongs. Beverly's curtains are back up in the living room. I found them in that box in the garage and I hung them back up myself, and when I was done I stood there in the afternoon light coming through them and I let myself cry for the first time in a long time. I started consulting part-time for a few of my old clients who asked me to come back in an advisory capacity. It is small work, but it is honest work, and it is mine, and that has always been enough for me. I think about Beverly every day. I think about what she would say about all of this. She was a wiser person than I am, and I believe she would say that I waited too long to draw the line, and that drawing it when I finally did was the most fatherly thing I had done in years. Not because it punished Nathan, but because it refused to pretend. Because it held him to the same standard I tried my whole life to hold myself. There is something I want to say to you, friends, because you have stayed with me through all of this and you deserve the real thing, not just the story. I am not a hero of this story. I am a man who loved too softly for too long and then had to love hard at the end to make up for it. I gave my son a life I never had, and somewhere along the way I forgot that the struggle was not the thing I was trying to save him from. The struggle was the thing that made me worth knowing. The early mornings, the loading dock, the copper smell on my hands. That was where I became someone. The property and moss. I protected him from all of it, and in doing so, I accidentally protected him from himself. That is the thing I carry. Not anger, not even grief, exactly. Just the weight of knowing what I would do differently. You teach people how to treat you, and you teach them slowly, over years, by what you accept and what you don't, by what you walk away from and what you stand inside of. I taught my son that I was a soft place, that there were no real consequences to my disappointment, that the old man could be moved around like furniture. On Christmas Eve, I taught him something different. I walked out of my own house and drove to a diner and ordered pecan pie and sat at a counter alone, and it was the first honest thing I had done in years. I will not sit in the kitchen chair, not for anyone, not anymore. And if that is the last real lesson my son ever learns from me, then maybe it was worth every painful step it took to teach it.